U.S. President Donald Trump has kicked off the new year, 2026, on the energy front with the abduction of the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, as well as President Trump's plans to get American oil companies into the southern African country to invest, drill, and export its hydrocarbon resources. The Venezuelan development of the past few days comes just as Nigeria flows its 2026 budget on an ambitious 2.1 million barrels per day and a benchmark of $64 a barrel. So let's raise the curtain on our series of discussions, interviews, and insights into Nigeria in 2026. My guest tonight on this is Professor Ken Ife, a development economist and a public policy analyst, live from our Abuja studios. It's good to see you in the new year, Professor. Thank you for coming in on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you were listening to the conversation with NJ Ayuk earlier from South Africa. Give me your take on the Venezuela's developing story, what we know already, and what can be described as the economics of geopolitical risks such as this.
Yeah, Bosun, I hope you remember. First of all, let me sum this up by saying that the word policeman has also suddenly become an offender and a prosecutor, and likely now to be a judge. So it's all in one package. If you remember when Trump was sworn in, you had me on your studio, and also when he addressed Davos, you also had me on the video. I told you that this man admires Putin. That's why you will see him criticize Putin for moving into Crimea and moving into that. He is exactly going to do what Putin is doing. But what he doesn't want is a third world war. He doesn't want a direct confrontation with Russia. And you notice that he's not even keen on Ukraine going to NATO, because all of those will provoke a war that he doesn't want to fight. But then, just see how it is playing out. He has gone into, but of course, we all know he was coming, because it took about 2 months to build up the armada. And nothing practically was going to stop him. And he's going to mop up all the other South Caribbean Sea countries. He's going to have a problem with Cuba. He won't go to Cuba for now, but he's just going to go to Colombia. And then he might even go to Mexico. He might even go to Greenland, that he said, because there's nothing Denmark can do. But the fact is that he will never carry that experiment to Taiwan. I have to tell you that he can't go there. In the case of Russia, you know that they've broken agreements, and they are well aware of it. In the early 90s, Russia was persuaded to allow the reunification of Germany. And the agreement also allowed them to release those countries. So all those Eastern European countries were freed. Germany was allowed to reunify, but they broke all the agreements. Because the agreement was that you will not advance, NATO will not advance towards Russia. As soon as they joined, what happened? About 6 of them joined NATO, and they were pushing in. And then now, but he would not allow Ukraine to do this. And in fact, Ukraine opened their mouth to talk about possibility of blocking Russia in the Black Sea. And that was why they moved in. They rode in the tanks in Crimea. Because how can they allow that? So they moved in from there. They still talked about the NATO. They moved into this. So that's a red line area, and Trump knows this. That's why his interest was stop the bloodshed. No, I want some mineral from Ukraine, but those rare minerals. But I have to tell you this. Remember in your interview, I told you that it was a big gamble on global tariff. It's a big gamble, because you saw it when China came into the picture. America now became aware that they have never done the homework to see the impact of supply chain disruption on national security and on economic strategy. They didn't do that. So in the war with Ukraine, they found out that they couldn't supply them all the missiles that they need. Because while they were asking China to pay $150%, China simply blocked the movement of rare earth mineral. And then you saw in Israel war, 12 days, they had to hurriedly stop this because Israel wanted missile, they can't get it. Because that China has blocked the supply. So all of these are part of the geopolitics. And I'm sorry that the Nigerian geopolitical side is that while we are cooperating with them on security, we have an issue to sort out, because there is going to be oil glut, without a doubt. So already the American Energy Agency.
Yeah, please go ahead, Professor.
Yeah. The agency, they already predicted that the price of crude this year will be between $52 to $58. This is before Trump came in. Now it is going to be under $50. Simply because already the crude, excess crude is 4 million barrels a day surplus to requirement. That is already pushing the price down. And now for them to ramp up production on Venezuela from 1 million barrels, they may even go up to 5 million barrels. But that means that by the end of the year, you'll be looking at about 10 million excess supply. America is going to take a lot of this because they have to pump out a lot of crude to pay, even if it's a judgment debt of $1 billion to Mobil, and then about $10 billion to Conoco. They're going to be looking for the money. They have to sell the crude. And then the coastal refineries in America that were depending on the heavy sour crude from that, they need the crude because they have been affected badly. So they will pump out, and it's cheaper to pump their crude than all the shale oil thing because that's very, very expensive. So there's going to be a lot of crude coming into the market. And to make matters worse, Russia is discounting on crude, Iran is discounting on crude, and I don't think those crude are going to be. So there's going to be a problem. So Nigeria, the only buffer, the only thing we have to thank God for is that Dangote is refining. So our refining sovereignty is now a reality. So even if we can run to that shelter, that if the price of crude is below 50, Nigeria needs price of crude between $60 and $70 for us to balance our books. If it's under 50, we're in trouble. The budget will be absolutely chaotic because we are going in with $64.8. You're not going anywhere with that.
Okay, so Professor, do you see energy and mineral resources? When we talk about hydrocarbon and rare earth minerals, uranium, and others as the centerpiece of geopolitical power play and global trade as of today, brought about by President Trump's comeback to power? Absolutely.
But let me even remind you, if you remember in the mid-70s, when we have OPEC and all that, America did a deal, the petrodollar deal, with Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all those Middle East. I will provide you protection. I want crude to be sold in dollar and bought in dollars. But the protection they are not having. You've seen the rascality of Israel in those areas. You've seen the problem with Iran going nuclear. And you see the inconsistency in American leadership. So they have to scamper to safety. That's why Saudi Arabia has moved into with Pakistan to do a deal with them to provide them a nuclear shield. And then they're now selling crude to not Russia, to China and India in their currency. So what this means that the dollar dominance is a thing of the past. And I have told to you that if it was going to take America a dynasty, if it is going to take them 20 years to run out of power, it's going to happen in this man's term, 3 to 4 years, because he's accelerating the pace of American decline, the empire's decline, and you know it. How do they decline? In the 60s, he stopped using a gold standard and forced everybody into a dollar. And then dollar is paper. America is owing 34 trillion. The global trade is 32 trillion. Their GDP is 26 trillion. How do you think they will never pay their debt? They will print more dollars and call it quantitative easing. But when people are now running away, withdrawing their treasury bills, withdrawing their this, and they're not using that, it's getting more difficult. So it's going to be more aggressive.
Okay, so
it's going to go more physical now.
Yes. So do you think the power play, geopolitics, power play, oil, what are the lessons and the expected impact of the Venezuelan situation for Africa's exporters? You talked about Nigeria a little bit earlier. Is there a bigger picture here?
No, the picture here is this. We are going to have serious stagflation if the status quo remains. That they're not delivering the PIA that says domestic crude obligation first. So first of all, you are going to jeopardize the $50 billion going into refinery in Ondo. You have Bua doing 200,000 barrels. You have another one in Lagos. You have 3 modular refineries. These guys are investing in this project. So if you cannot guarantee them your crude, then what are you thinking about? The country will slide. And I have said to the president, over 6 months now, both Senate and House of Rep have approved 30% mandatory value addition on Nigerian raw material. And that includes crude. Now, luckily for us, 50% of participation in the local crude in the onshore are Nigerians. Get this crude to Nigerians to refine so that we can ensure that with the leadership of Dangote, we have refining sovereignty. And that will serve a captive audience of Africa. We are using $20 billion in importing refined products. So we will escape the repercussion of what Trump is doing. Because when there is a slump in that price, it's only value addition that would enable you to recoup. The government loss of revenue on the steel, you will gain from refined products. That is the only way. If you're thinking of any other thing, it's going to be absolute disaster if you try any other thing.
So, let me allow you to take a deep dive for me on Nigeria's macroeconomic outlook for 2026 Nigeria. That was released by the central bank a few days ago. Walk me through two of the four pillars that the central bank highlighted. Of course, on the top of that was the monetary policy and all of that. But again, the central bank also talked about external sector stability, structural transformation, international competitiveness that we need to achieve this year as policy priorities. How are you seeing us on track on that?
Now, I like that projection, to be honest, because it projected that our GDP will grow by 4.49%. That is realistic, because we've already turned into, by the time the result comes for last December, you're going to see that we're going to be averaging at about 4%. Because that is the cyclical peak is in December. So we will be able to run that, or maybe even improve on that. The inflation, he said 12.9%. We already hit 12.4%. So that's realistic. We might even go below that over time. But we'll have to revise these calculations based on what projections of what crude situation is going to be. It's not good. We have to revise, to have a second look at all of these projections, because they all depend on our projected price, and then $51 and all that.
So you think the Ministry of Budget, of Budget and National Planning has a lot of work to do here?
I hope they wake up to the fact that they need competence, they need integrity. They need to follow the law. There are fiscal laws that they completely abandoned, and that is a problem for the president, and is now highlighted itself as the Achilles heel of the administration. Look at all the good things that they have done, all kinds of reforms, but the budget is driving the entire polity into crisis, just because there is indiscipline in the design of budget. We haven't even had economic planning for 3 years. We haven't had. Even the new 26 to 2030 plan, they haven't started that. So I don't want to spend my time talking about that, to be honest with you. In terms of the central bank, they have four priorities. One, the first priority is to strengthen monetary policy transmission and effectiveness, and they do that through communication, better communication. Don't forget that this is an economy where speculation was doing all the damage. And then, even when we have so many good things to report on the interplay and the transmission of policy, communication of it is so important. If you have a regime where speculation is very rife, so then we need to do more on communication. Then, of course, you have the safeguarding financial stability by deepening our domestic financial market. That again, you know what happened in capital market. The capital market has been very successful, posting over 40% growth. And you know that as Dangote comes in this month or next month, it's going to even double from 98 trillion to about 200 trillion or more. So, but we've got more work to do in that area to make sure that we can strengthen the multiple. But don't forget, their core mandate is not only price stability, which we have talked about in the first policy.
Yes.
But there's a financial system stability, which is in the second one. And that's where you see them ticking all the boxes on non-performing loan, on capital adequacy ratio, and all of those stuff. So they're all coming together nicely, fueled by stability in the foreign exchange. So that is helpful, to be honest. But the third one is the one that goes to look at the external sector. Because external sectors where Forex plays a much higher role, and where international competitiveness and all of that, and especially looking into West Africa, or not Africa Continental Free Trade.
Yes.
And I so like the fact that the central bank has taken that on to prepare the banks to get in and do the business, and to recognize that PAPS, that is the Pan-Africa Payment Settlement System, must be given the impetus for it to move. So I'm so happy that they've taken it by that bull by the horn.
All right,
and then, of course, the other area of the fourth one is about sustainable development, which is, and don't forget that the third mandate, they have two mandates for central bank, but there's an auxiliary mandate which is promoting sustainable development. It is through this one that you see domestic finance intervention, you see them intervening in addressing structural issues, and then structural transformation issues, and in fact, so all of those come from that auxiliary mandate, but they're not the core. So they made a lot of recommendations, and I will not be surprised that they're going to deal frontally with the issue of interest rates, how they affect the real sector, and all of that. They're going to come down to deal with those.
Professor Ken, we're always pleased to have you on Arise News Channel and the Arise Exchange. We thank you so much for your deep insights, as always, on matters macro, micro, and even the markets. Have a wonderful evening out there in Abuja. We thank you, as always, for joining us. It's the early start in the new year. We've got a lot of time to catch up.